So, now Mr. Crispin Parelius Johannessen, who came all the way from Scandinavia to present Moments in Time. He is an equine photographer, an artist.
Welcome to my artist talk. As I present this, we are in Paris at the international meeting Collectif Pour Chevaux to discuss flexion of the horse's neck. We are speakers from many various backgrounds and professions. I'm invited as a photographer of equine neck flexion to talk about moments in time and the equestrian representation. Being in Paris, we are roughly 660 kilometers from the oldest known pictures of horses, believed to be over 30,000 years old. And as it happens, in the cave Chevaux, there is a drawing called The Panel of Horses, showing 4 horses in various degrees of equine neck flexion. Making pictures of horses with focus on their neck flexion is therefore not exactly a new idea under the sun. About 5 kilometers to the north of us lies the Louvre and d'Orsay museums. The Louvre and d'Orsay museums, together housing one of the world's largest collections of art depicting equines and equestrians. There are many variations of neck flexion to be seen. Also often seen together with neck flexion is other facial expressions, such as open mouths. If artists were making pictures of horses in neck flexion 30,000 years ago, that means we have been looking at living horses with the naked eye and comparing this experience to looking at representation of horses in various forms for a very long time. I am sure they recognize the difference. Representations in its various forms looks different to what is represented, in this case, the living horse. This applies even for highly realistic photography. However, representation in photographic form can even show us information that our naked eye cannot perceive. There's a lot of looking at horses and making pictures of them. Much of it has been done in France, so perhaps that makes it particularly appropriate that we are here today. We are in a hotspot of looking at representation of horses in neck flexion for over 30,000 years. As well as this, we are here because the French government has appointed a delegation to come up with 46 recommendations in front of the Paris Olympics 2024. One of the recommendations reads as follows. Could you try clicking and see if we can get it? The first evening here, I decided to go to the Musée d'Orsay and photograph with my telephone all the equine and equestrian images I could find. I will now present these to you. And if you just keep clicking in a nice rhythmical way. Keep on, just to go fast. stop. The last picture was just added. It's Jericho, but I thought it was so nice. And then we go back to the text. There were 32 works of art I found. There were at least flexion in 18 of them, and there were at least open mouths in 23 of them. I will now go on and read an extract from a chapter, an essay I have written. So if we can click again, and click again. Descriptive Falstable moments, or the art of equestrian photography made popular. The published photographic series Falstable Moments showed an equestrian during the warm-up phase at a large international horse sports event in the south of Sweden. The dressage horse and rider were depicted in rather unusual moments of movement, some of them in sequences compared to what is conventionally published today in the press. The series of roughly 60 photographs were selected from the almost 1,600 images shot during a period of 70 minutes on 2 separate days, averaging roughly 23 shots a minute. I was positioned amongst the public, fully visible in an area permitting photography, but it was not a prearranged shoot with regard to position and timing of the subject. The subject had not been in any way instructed how to perform or not perform in front of the camera. But as the event was open to the public, he should expect to be photographed. The rider had already been accused of non-horse-friendly conduct after an incident a few months before, and it was therefore interesting to photograph in relation to issues of documentation, such as how would equestrian abuse and force look like? Is it possible to document it? The collection of photographs depicts the horse in poses where she appears to be jumping around, rearing and bucking. The horse's neck was often maximally flexed, causing at times the teeth to be pressured into the flesh of the shoulder. The high quality gave the opportunity to see details in the horse's mouth, how the bit appeared to press deep into the tongue, which was bluish in color. Other details were of muscle tension around the eye. The white for the horse's eyeball was visible, giving the impression of the horse straining to see. The rider's position appears unbalanced on the horse, as it shows him falling backwards beyond his center of gravity, giving the impression of staying on top of the horse by holding onto the reins attached to the 2 metal bits. The rider's legs appeared to be digging the spurs into the horse's ribs, causing skin ripples, which gave an impression of how deep they dug in. The horse's noseband appears to pinch the skin, and flesh of the muzzle appear contorted and twisted, giving the impression of the noseband digging into the horse's flesh. The nostrils seem to open into maximal dilation, giving the impression of a horse straining to inhale more air. I offered them to the only publisher I knew who would be interested in making them visible to an audience, Epona TV, and the series was shared by several thousands of viewers on social media within the first 48 hours. As a result of the social media visibility, over 30 national and international publications, mostly equine, reported on the publication of the images and the controversy they generated. The FEI, the sole controlling authority of all international equestrian events, initially stated, quote, "The FEI finds these images extremely disturbing. We are very concerned about the incident and we are investigating it thoroughly. We have already contacted the chief steward at Falstable to ask for a full report specifically on this issue," unquote. However, in a later press release, they claimed no action could be taken against the rider for non-horse-friendly conduct, as there was insufficient documentation. The chief steward employed by the FEI to secure the welfare of the horses through on-site, naked eye observation claimed there had been no unreasonable or abusive riding. This was based on observing the event with their naked eye, and they had, as far as I know, no supporting visual documentation to support the denial that any non-horse-friendly conduct had taken place. The FEI never responded to my offer of showing them all 1,581 photographs, as only roughly 60 were published. Part of the background for producing and publishing Falsifiable Moments was that for some years I had been following the development in the press and social media of the conflict regarding brutality. These discussions also exposed a division within the equine audience of how to deal with photographic documentation and perception. It concerned photographs that showed mainly the controversial training method named rollkyr. Rollkyr contorts the horse's neck into a hyperflexed posture, potentially obstructing the horse's breathing, smell, and vision. It was examined by equitation scientists as both mentally and physical abuse. Today, equitation scientists believe this is adequately proven to be damaging for the horse, mentally and physically. And yet, despite this, the practice of hyperflexion continues at equestrian events with little or no intervention. Despite there being a huge debate, I could see then and now very few official attempts, practices, or guidelines to secure visual documentation outside of the competition arena, in attempt to prove or disprove non-horse-friendly conduct. Surely someone should be securing valid documentation. To do this, of course, one needs to discuss how to create the documentation, and there appears to be little willingness to do so. The visual material I had seen from warm-ups that caused controversy were a little undercover in style prior to Falsifiable Moments, with low-quality production and usually dismissed as being attacks on the horse world from activists. With a few exceptions, they were mostly published on social media with a claim that the photographs exposed rider brutality towards the horse in the sports, an opinion increasingly supported by a growing audience and scientists. There was ample research by equitation science to support the contention that the depicted postures and details could be interpreted as severely painful and damaging to the horse by loss of vision, ability to breathe, and postures relating to conflict behavior and mental stress. The critics of these images, including the governing equestrian organizations, would, however, dismiss them as valid documentations exposing brutality because they were produced by activists, were somehow bad photographs, low quality, the wrong angles, lacking in context, or merely being moments in time, a term often used but rarely defined. Strictly speaking, all photography is moments in time. It seemed to me they were dismissing the potential of photographic information as documentation of potentially non-horse-friendly conduct. It seemed to me that the take they had on photography was seen to make the equestrian appear brutal through visual manipulation rather than photographic information describing brutality. As I have worked with both training and teaching horse and rider, I was concerned with the treatment of horses that I experienced as non-horse friendly, not just in dressage, but in all disciplines. I am also educated as a fine art photographer and video artist, and I'm relatively experienced to how the camera constructs vision, even though it must be added that developments are continuously changing the means of production, and therefore seeing. The reluctant and dismissive attitudes towards photography as a tool to document riding were increasingly making me wonder what it would take to make the equestrian visual documentation to be received as meaningful and valid. How can the audience have such different ways of perceiving the same material? Surely we should be able to perceive, to some extent at least, if the horse is suffering or not. How does using force look? Falsifiable Moments was an experiment of producing better quality documentation to see how the audience would receive it and hopefully push the question, don't people see any impression of brutality, or is it that they don't want to see the impression of brutality made visible? The practice of looking at horses. Over 30,000 years ago, an equine artist started to shape a horse with charcoal on the stone wall of the cave Chevaux in the Gorge of Ardèche in the south of France. The cave is believed to contain the oldest paintings of horses. I imagine the artist viewed horses from a vantage point, taking note of how they stood and moved, and of course the degree of neck flexion. Maybe even close enough to see the position and shape of the eyes, the direction of the ears are pointing. Would the horse be opening his or her mouth, and how the nostrils would be dilating to circles. The artist went into the darkness of the cave and painted with charcoal from a memory of his or her perception, making anatomical decisions from, for us, an unknown intention. On one of the panels, the artist has decided to paint for horses with various degrees of neck flexion and surprisingly large and rounded crests. The horse nearest the viewer shows clearly a horse with an open mouth, an aspect that is to become very conventional in equine and particularly in equestrian representation, despite horses rarely choosing to open their mouths apart from when eating. The Chevaux cave could be, as suggested by Tamsin Pickerel, where the documented journey of the horse and human relationship begins. Pickerel further claims, in relation to presenting the narrative of the horse in art, that the horse and human relationship is one of the longest love affairs to traverse history, and it is an affair that has been catalogued by the hand of the artist. I am interested in exploring this cataloguing process, as I am myself an artist contributing to this documented history with images such as Falsable Horse Show, but can they be seen as contributing to one of the longest love affairs? Thus, by contextualizing my own work, I wish to explore how we create the visually documented narrative and how we perceive it, from the Chevaux cave to today's equine horse sports photography. For thousands of years, humans have grappled with various ways of showing the horse with different angles, postures, and facial grimaces, and for the longest period of time, unaided by photographic technology. Do the details and information seen in the visual documents confirm this suggested love affair? If so, we may wonder what has been included or excluded in this history presented as a love affair. And where does today's photo documents of hyperflexed horses fit in? Stepping into the role of an equestrian horse sports photographer, I travelled around Europe as an accredited press photographer, producing images for the equestrian press. I wanted to explore the conventions of equestrian photography in sport to understand the practices and get behind the surface scene. This meant I had to educate myself as to what aesthetic ideals the equestrian sport publishers mostly wanted. For show jumping, the required image was mostly one in which the horse was shown mid-air across the jump, more in the upward movement rather than the downward phase. For dressage, there would be a few more moments the press could publish. Usually they would involve front and hind legs at the highest phase of movement, the most flexed position, such as in the piaffe passage or pirouettes. The neck should be flexed, but not too much as with rollkir, as this posture has never been permitted in competition. Another acceptable convention would show the horse at the maximum of leg extensions, such as in the extended trot or gallop. I spent some time analysing what the equine media wanted, and I made sure I became good at getting the perfect moment, the trophy shots, the ones that could be published. The more I did this, the more I became frustrated at the very limited range of moments that would be considered for publication. It seemed far more limited than I had ever previously imagined. In most sequences of motion, there are potentially thousands of possible shots, and yet I found the ones that we all end up seeing rather similar and more or less the same phases of motion. It all seemed to me about timing for the perceived perfect moment. In the press room, I started feeling a bit out of place and impatient with the culture producing repeatedly the same trophy shots. The very same selected moments in time, repeated again and again, the same poses, just with a different rider and horse in a different location and time. It seemed to me that everyone was chasing the same trophies, from the press photographers to the publishers and the audience. The seductive hunt for trophy shots to sell had withered away into a distaste for continued selling photographs to the press. The critical artist in me was beginning to awaken, the artist in me that was trained to look where others fear to look and question what lies behind what is shown, not least what is not shown and why. As I am also from an experimental practice of photography and video, I would upload my material and work with different ways of presenting it, slowing down video sequences, reanimating stills to move again, exploring the detail. I was beginning to get an understanding of what I could see with the latest advances in camera technology. A new world of information was opening up. I was building up a huge archive of photos that I knew would be unwanted by the equine press, and I wondered what the other photographers did with all the images unwanted by the press and glossy equestrian magazines. I wondered why not show them. I wondered how can you not show them. I wondered how many such unwanted images are immediately deleted from cameras or hidden away in hard drives, never to be seen. It was increasingly clear that I was not shooting my camera at the same time or in the same direction as other press photographers, and I wondered if my days as an accredited press photographer were numbered. And sure enough, my applications of accreditation started being refused. I felt I was observed in a system so sensitive and restrictive as to realize I was not shooting in the conventionally acceptable direction and moment. Audiences started to approach me with accusations of being a nasty person, and I experienced evictions and threats of physical violence if I did not stop photographing. To shoot your camera at the wrong moment during an equestrian event can evoke strong responses from the organizers, riders, and audience, even when it is in public areas. It is therefore not just publishing photographs that appears problematic and is therefore vigilantly controlled, but also shooting them in the first place, which also turns out to be vigilantly controlled, as I have increasingly experienced. If these unseen photographs were merely the wrong moment with the wrong angle of the horse's body, as many would insist, how could this explain that a part of the audience was completely convinced that they portray brutality and violence? In my experience, it is really easy to take photographs that look brutal, and actually, a lot of the time, quite a challenge to shoot the ones that give a trophy shot quality appearance. Ironically, often the ones with trophy shots are ironically described as the shots that represent the overall appearance. To understand the equine community's relationship to photography, I would like to go back to a historical event, perhaps the most significant of the earliest projects photographing the horse in motion, the work of Edward Muybridge. It took over 30,000 years from the first equine depictions to the emergence of the camera, a mechanical device constructed to assist our eye in perceiving the horse. And it proved to be much better than our naked eye at capturing the horse in motion. The motion shots created by Muybridge had an enormous impact on how we understand vision, perception, nature, and movement. The Muybridge photographs show us that in spite of thousands of years of viewing horses, we had not really understood how they moved, and that our attempts at understanding this without the camera were to a large extent very different to how we had imagined. Photography gave us access to visual details so far unseen, unimagined, and perhaps unbelievable. The camera's descriptions showed us that so much of the visual world eludes our perception and consciousness. As the story goes, Leland Stanford had made a bet as to whether all four legs of the horse are off the ground at the same moment in the trot and canter. It was impossible for the human naked eye to see this clearly. Our eyes could not pick up such detail from the fast-moving horse. To prove this idea, Muybridge came up with the photographic evidence showing that all legs were off the ground at the same moment. The photographic project Animal Locomotion commenced in 1872 and was completed in 1885. The photographic sequences initially depicted 32 horses in motion. He developed this into lecture talks he called descriptive zoopraxography, or the science of animal locomotion made popular. If I have understood correctly, he would first describe in great detail how he constructed the shooting of the photographs, distances, angles, timing, and all the machinery involved. This was followed with showing consecutive phases of a single step from each of the different gates. This would be illustrated by photographs, the size of life from nature, and comparisons made with interpretations of the same movements by artists of prehistoric, ancient, medieval, and modern times. He would finish by showing collections of still images put into motion by the supraxic scope, recognized by some as the start of the moving image. The talk gave the audience for the first time an opportunity to compare the still and moving image, as well as comparing the photographed horse with the painted and sculpted interpretations that had preceded it. Muybridge proved that all the horse's legs are off the ground at the same time, thus establishing photography as a tool to record information that our eye cannot see. The value of scientific understanding after this is beyond doubt proved by today's extensive, sophisticated developments in photographic technology, used in research helping us to perceive and analyze what our biological eye cannot see. In the horse world, it is used in photo finishes. I am now going to move over to the next section. I'm just going to give you a quick run-through, very quick, of a few incidents since Falsterbo moments. One was that I, the following year, filmed the FEI stewards at work. After that, I realized that I would maybe be evicted, but also I was quite interested, together with Julie Taylor of Epona TV, to try to work with this idea of the still image versus the moving image. At that time, my camera could not pick out still photos that were of a sufficient quality, really, to be used. So I waited for a few years now, and I now have a camera that is approaching, you can film video and pick out still images, which is what I'm going to do today. This enables at least me to work on my own when I am filming and photographing, as I don't need to have two pieces of equipment. I think this is also quite interesting for many future developments, possible future developments. It's not maybe that important here, but shortly after shooting this picture, Julie and I were evicted from Falsterbo Horse Show. You can see that. Another thing that was in that year, as I had been giving talks about documenting horse sports, I don't know if they had seen that, documenting the warm-ups, but Falsterbo, the organizers of Falsterbo Horse Show, obviously thought they would attempt at documenting it themselves, so they put a camera up a tree by the warm-up arena. Another very significant, which is of a very recent nature, just in March this year, was that the Swedish photographer Roland Thunholm, who was photographing, not to do with dressage, but it was photographing the Global Championship Tour in Stockholm, when there was an accident that happened with one of the riders, he was actually first told to move away from photographing, and then secondly, the part of the organizers asked him to delete his memory card. Another development which I think is of someone trying to document is they put cameras at Gothenburg Horseshoe this year, which I thought was rather funnily called the Gothenburg Corner. We'll see if we can film it. And I'm showing you this partly because, our visual perception is very selective, but of course documentation is also hugely selective. So we'll have a quick look at this. So what happened was that they did not have cameras in part of the arena. What was also very interesting for us that followed this, it was live streamed on a website at the same time that the show is going on in another arena. But you could actually hear the organizers also sitting, telling the film crew who to film and not to film and what. So it was really interesting looking at how they thought, this would. And there he comes back. I thought that was rather aptly called the Gothenburg Corner. We have also had this picture, which was published recently this summer after Falsterbo show, which started a petition to get nosebands completely. This is Julie Taylor's book, which I recommend. Incidentally, one of my photographs on the front, which I worked a lot with to reference old imagery, equestrian imagery. And then, of course, we have the incident, which is also worth looking into, is that Andreas Helgestrand, together with actually Ludger Beerbaum, had undercover photographers at their premises. Another interesting one in 2021 was that the FEI added a page to their website called Horses in Art Throughout the Ages. You can go in and look at it. They use a little bit, they go to cave paintings. But what I found very interesting, they also have the tapestries that were mentioned in the previous talk. Is that they end this history looking at who, well, you can read it. Whilst 20th century modern artists such as Kandinsky and Picasso may have created highly abstract images of equines in their work, their styles have come and gone, while Remington's has persisted. Will it last through the 21st century? Only time will tell. They are talking about Remington style. Now I'm going to show you what Remington style is. This is the FEI, what they think. Another event is the German Equestrian Federation has started this observation guide. I'm going to get back to that. So it started with investigating the relationship between the naked eye observation and the still and moving image. And now I'm going to try to show you something which I'm increasingly interested in, and that is the research that goes into perception and how we perceive. I think you probably saw that image. But did you see this one? Did you see it now? I'm now going to go into another thing, which is a sort of experiment hugely inspired by Muybridge. Moving on quickly here. So first we will see a sequence of still images. We'll see the video, then we'll see a section of new still images from the same video, and then we'll look at the video. So now I'm going to show you a second section of still images from the same video. The second again. Did you see these in the moving image? I'm not going to show it you again, as we'll move on. Show you another image. So I'm not going to speak about this, but I would like to refer you to looking at it in detail and asking yourself the question, to which extent is this task possible for anyone to complete, standing by the warm-up, watching several horses and without any form of photographic assistance to be able to decide what is going on. And if you look at the detailed, which a steward is expected to actually see, what the steward is actually expected to see, I would like you to look at that. And then I shall move across and just take 2 minutes to read my end. If you are not given the condition to see something, you most likely won't see something. I really believe in looking at the control, organization, and regulation of the means of production, publishing, and perception of the equestrian photographic image. I really believe in using photography to assist our perception and to document the horse's life, as our perception is highly unreliable. Photographic information, it seems, should preferably not be produced, published, or in any other way perceived and given a significant position. Why? By insisting on on-site, naked eye observation, it constructs and maintains the space for interpretation where it is very hard, if not almost impossible, to perceive and identify non-horse-friendly conduct. By not securing photographic documentation, it makes it hard to prove non-horse-friendly conduct has occurred. By insisting on not using photography extensively, it could seem that this ensures minimal intervention of the equestrian, but at the same time as it has an alibi for taking care of equine welfare. For me, so much of the discourse surrounding equestrian sports, the social license to operate, and equine welfare is about regulating the visibility and perception of non-horse-friendly conduct. It creates an open space for interpretation that ensures minimal intervention. Much talk of behaviors having been continuous and constant make me wonder, why do we not talk of zero tolerance? Instead, we measure how much non-horse-friendly conduct we can get away with in the face of various demands. The problem or weakness with this system of on-site naked eye observation is photographic moments of time. Moments that since Muybridge has been selected away, not published, not seen. But this is no longer possible, as publishing conventions have lost control with publishing practices of social media. Further, with photographic development of the equestrian image is ever more exposing in its detail. Combine these factors with equine studies, who knows how fast the equestrian image will develop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Crispin.